is contagious!
Hi and welcome to This is Contagious, a show where we look at how contagious ideas are shaping brands and culture. I'm Alex.
I'm Chloe.
And I'm Katrina.
Today we're discussing why nostalgia is inescapable at the moment, what's driving that trend, and what the opportunities are for brands. We'll uncover the secret reasons that people want to live in times they never experienced. We'll be finding out about the technology that allows you to smell memories you never actually had, and we'll be discovering how Gen Z is physically retreating into the past. But first, let's have a quick check-in on the wider world. Katrina, what's contagious for you at the moment and why?
So I've been really obsessed with this news story from DoorDash, the delivery company in the United States. They are paying delivery couriers to submit video clips and complete digital tasks as a way of helping improve artificial intelligence and robotics models. So maybe you remember there was a story from the end of last year about the potential for domestic robots to become a thing. Only right now, they're not very good at doing stuff. So this, I guess, is a way of accelerating their learning process for household chores and sort of manually done tasks. And it's just extending the data inputs that these systems can receive and learn from.
So we're literally employing people to train the robots that will replace them, right? That's what's going on here.
Yeah, that's pretty much what's going on, Alex. When you put it like that, it sounds infinitely bleaker.
Okay, that's definitely a contagious thing. Chloe, what's contagious for you at the moment?
Well, what I've been thinking about is the new trend of paperwork parties. I did not even think this was a real thing until one of our colleagues in the Contagious office assured me that she has been getting together with her friends and they do their very boring administrative tasks together. And apparently this is all the rage with Gen Z. It makes me feel about 1,000 years old because I know that when I was in my 20s, I was not hanging out with my friends and doing errands together as a social activity. But
this is exactly the kind of thing that my 86-year-old mother would be absolutely down with. She would love it.
So maybe it isn't an age thing, but it is a sign of how young people are so overwhelmed by adulting that they're trying to actually build it into their day as a social activity.
On one hand, I kind of respect this, but on another hand, I am very, very disappointed with Gen Z. Of all the things you could be doing in the evening, doing your admin, it somehow puts a dagger in my Gen X heart.
What's your most contagious thing then, Alex?
Currently, I'm loving the new range of collectible charms from the accessible luxury brand Coach. So Coach is known for things like leather bags, that kind of stuff. The charms are actually mini books, so they're probably about the size of a big Labubu, right? The books themselves aren't that mini. The books are all by female authors that have been banned or censored. So they're things like I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings or Sense and Sensibility. It's actually a collab with Penguin Random House, and they're promoting it with celebrities like Elle Fanning and Storm Reid. I'm not a big fan of luxury campaigns generally. I find them incredibly dull for the most part.
Maybe you're not very luxurious, Alex. Maybe that's what it is.
I am definitely not luxurious. I am not the target market for anything that luxury wants to try and send my way. But I think this is kind of fascinating. One, I just like the idea that books are a status symbol. There was a quote from the CMO of Coach who said it was based on insight about how our chums Gen Z, once again, felt that books were a form of refuge, a way to slow down, to reflect, feel a sense of belonging. And I think it ties into like some other stuff we've seen. Like there's a whole trend on TikTok earlier this year about analog bags, where people are specifically young people, carrying bags full of things like books, pens, and knitting, just to help them be offline. Personally, I think there's a little bit of a signaling to others as well. I think there's a bit of like, look at me, I'm a smart intellectual. I've got a book hanging off my bag.
It's performative reading. I do think this is such a great initiative from a marketing point of view, but it makes me feel a bit uncomfortable that you can't just sit quietly with a book. You need to tell everyone about it and not just that plaster it onto your accessories.
If a tree reads a book in a forest and no one's there, does anyone know that the tree read the book?
Sure.
Okay, after that brief recap of what's contagious in our world right now, shall we hear from our sponsor?
This is the sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Contagious IQ. Yes, we sponsor our own show. Contagious IQ is an intelligence platform that helps brands and agencies supercharge their marketing by learning from the world's most creative brands and campaigns, as well as the most influential trends. If you want to craft better strategies, come up with more creative ideas, and generally create work that's going to put a dent in culture, just search Contagious IQ to find out more. Okay, that's the hard sell over. Let's get back to the show. So, Chloe, nostalgia ain't what it used to be. It's actually bigger than it used to be, right?
Right. Of course, nostalgia is nothing new. But what we're seeing right now is that there is a resurgence of nostalgia. So if you look at Google Trends data, there's been steady growth since the mid-2010s in searches for terms like Y2K aesthetic or 90s fashion. And if you go on TikTok, there are billions of views for hashtags like Y2K, 90s kids, or nostalgia. So yes, there's nothing really that new about nostalgia, but it's completely dominating the cultural zeitgeist right now.
Is this not something that's just a little bit kind of cyclical? We seem to see this sort of over and over at sort of 20-year intervals. If I think back to being a kid in the 70s, the Grease movie was sort of celebrating 1950s culture. And, that stuff just goes kind of round and round a little bit, doesn't it, that cycle?
Yeah, there's definitely true that there's a cyclical nature to looking, 20 years back or 30 years back. So you have Happy Days looking 20 years back. You have Back to the Future in the 80s going back to the 50s. So it's definitely something that we've seen in culture before. But I think what we're seeing now is just the breadth of nostalgia, just infiltrating every aspect of culture. So if you go on social media, you go through fashion, you go through entertainment, it's just this complete tsunami of nostalgia, let's say.
And it's worth saying, right, not all these nostalgic things are nostalgic for the 50s, because those are all the examples we've given. Like in the 90s, there was that 70s show, right? It is an acceptable kind of like 20 to 30 year kind of lag, right?
Exactly.
Recently, it feels like there's like that lag is incredibly shortened, right? There is a nostalgia for the 90s, but we're also seeing like the most recent hot trend of the year was actually the 2016 nostalgia trend. So it's only like a 10-year nostalgia wave.
Yeah, I mean, 2016, obviously it was the last good year. I think that was the rationale for it before we got embroiled in things like COVID and screen addiction and relentless doom scrolling. So 2016, no wonder we retreat there, because compared to today, it feels positively idyllic.
I got to say, I think this might be a little bit of very rosy tinted stuff, because 2016 wasn't that idyllic. Didn't we lose like David Bowie? We lost Prince.
Right, but that's not what these people are thinking about when they're going on TikTok and showing filters from 2016 and showing their pictures on their camera roll from 10 years ago. They're really talking about, how they felt at that time and not thinking about the death of David Bowie, I guess.
Yes, no one's nostalgic for the death of Bowie, I would like to think. But there's a bit more to it, obviously. Then there's people wishing they were there a little bit, but some people are actually trying to physically be there, aren't they? Kind of time travel as best they can, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to sort of bathe in the memory of times gone by, but it's another thing to sort of live in those environments. I was reading the other week about a trend called nostalgia, which is the subject of a feature in Architectural Digest. The feature is accompanied by the most amazing images of these people who've recreated their teenage bedrooms sort of in that Y2K aesthetic. So literally they've hunted down the things that they had on eBay. They've rearranged their sort of old video cassettes in the order, rehung posters of their idols from that era. It's like an explosion of pink wallpaper and fluffy teddy bears and cathode ray tube TVs taking up an unnatural amount of space.
So this is really about the teenage bedroom.
It's very much the teenage bedroom. And the people that were interviewed for this feature were talking about feeling like it was almost a place of safety.
We think there's a little bit of that in the appeal of things like Stranger Things, which are obviously, came out, was it about 10 years ago now? But actually is like a real harking back to the 80s. So there's a real sort of sense of, I want to go back even further into a slightly pre-digital time where things were like a little bit cozier, even though literal monsters live there.
Well, I think what's really interesting is who is doing the retreating in this nostalgia scenario, Katrina. And there's research that shows that Gen Z is particularly nostalgic. So some of those people who were interviewed for the article, they were digging in their childhood bedrooms and taking things from the like weird, VHS cassettes, their relics from their childhood, and then making a shrine out of those. But some of the people didn't actually experience it the first time round. A lot of this generation, they feel nostalgic for the 90s, even though they were born in the 2000s, which is so weird. So there's data from GWI that says more than a third of this generation feels nostalgic for the 90s.
I think the official definition of Gen Z is 1997 to 2012. So even if you were born in the 90s, at the
you don't
oldest,
remember it.
Yeah, you don't remember it. You were 3 years old at the max if you're Gen
Right.
Z. So that's a huge part of Gen Z that is feeling nostalgic for a time they never lived in, right?
And there's a term for this too. It's called anemoia, which is feeling nostalgic for a time that you didn't actually experience for yourself.
Yeah, that chimes with what they were saying in the Architectural Digest feature. So some of the people that they were interviewing literally were recreating the room that they'd had as a teen. Others had maybe been little kids when they were living through that era. And so they were imagining what their bedroom might have looked like if they'd been a teen at that time. So there's almost like an element of wish fulfillment about some of this.
I think it's true. Like, when I think about how popular Friends is right now, I think that's exactly why it's wish fulfillment. It's these kids who, never had a flip phone, who never gathered round in Central Perk or a coffee shop to talk to their friends in real life, and are kind of wishing that were their lives. And they weren't all locked on their own smartphones, just like doom scrolling.
That group of friends who had a weirdly aspirational Manhattan loft at a time when, I don't know, even they couldn't have afforded it back then, and
It's
is
rent
wildly
control.
out of reach.
It was rent control, Katrina. Yes, I know everything about Friends.
Don't bring your rent control arguments to this show, Chloe. But we are seeing something really weird happening with Friends, right? It is now the subject, I don't know if subjects, is that the right word, of a Happy Meal at McDonald's. So there's a Friends Happy Meal for adults specifically. So it's literally, I understand, comes in a box, has the McNuggets, but small plastic toys of Ross, Rachel, Phoebe, the whole gang. Again, it feels like a really curious signal of both, first of all, the fact that adults are behaving a little bit more like kids who are normally the target market for Happy Meals, but also still being incredibly nostalgic and being persuaded to buy food because of a show that launched in the 90s and finished in 2004, 2006.
Point of order, it's not called a Friends Happy Meal, it's called the Friends Meal, Alex. Splitting hairs perhaps a little bit.
I stand massively corrected on that. I'm so sorry.
But it has all the hallmarks of a classic Happy Meal, the plastic toys, the special packaging, the freebies, the nuggets, all the things.
And obviously McDonald's can't promise happiness. So it's merely a meal that may or may not provide happiness.
I feel like we're moving into the phase of culture where people might start suing for not delivering on happiness.
I want my money back on these nuggets. We are seeing a lot of this whole kidulting trend, adults behaving somewhat like children. They're investing money in toys. Obviously, we saw the big trend around Labubu's in 2025. There is a whole wave of this stuff. It's not merely a kind of passing fad. It's a really significant draw for these people. There's a lot of money in this kidulting, isn't there?
It is an absolutely massive draw. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of different social factors coming together. The state of the economy at the moment means that all of those traditional kind of life goals that we used to set our sights on as younger people, going to university, finding your partner, maybe getting married, having a family, the house of your dreams. Oh my God, how far away does a lot of that stuff feel for a lot of people now? And increasingly, people are turning more to taking pleasure in the moment, more of this sort of carpe diem mentality that allows them to indulge the things that will make them happy now, and perhaps indulge in a bit of wish fulfillment, things that they couldn't have afforded or automatically bought when they were kids and in that age range. Now you can afford that thing and you can build your collection and you can do that thing that makes you happy.
It's such a generational downgrade, though, isn't it? From you can't get the house of your dreams, so why don't you just recreate the bedroom of your teenage years? The bedroom of your dreams is all you can afford right now.
Yeah, it's massive. Take it up with the boomers, Alex.
Yeah, take it up with the bloody boomers. I think, when we sort of look at kind of why this stuff is happening, I think the documentarian Adam Curtis has some really interesting views on this, which I think come out at the end of his documentary series Shifty. And he sort of talks about this phenomenon of how memory is no longer becoming history anymore because we are constantly keeping the past kind of with us. We're keeping it alive. So, in the case of Friends, we're looking at a series that's finished in 2004, but is now fully available on streaming. It's probably being rebroadcast on a lot of traditional channels as well. It is constantly with us. And our photo apps on our phones are reminding us this is what you were doing 10, 15 years ago on this day. Adam Curtis has this lovely phrase that the past is haunting the present.
It's a perfect way of describing it, because when we think of those sort of supernatural phenomena like hauntings, it's always associated in culture with an inability to move on or being stuck in a particular state and sort of captive to a particular phase, neither one thing nor the other. And it feels so connected to the way culture feels right now, this endless remixing and recycling, rather than the development of culture that feels new and exciting and unexpected.
I think Adam Curtis specifically talks about AI. And that's where it becomes really interesting. First of all, from what you said, Katrina, that is another reason why things are so scary right now. But specifically when it comes to what he's saying about this strange haunting, it's really prevalent in AI because what AI is basically doing is being trained on existing data. And so it has to regurgitate the past instead of creating a new future. He says that AI is a vast collection of our dreams and fantasies that we put online. And AI can't imagine anything that hasn't happened yet. I think that is something that's quite interesting to think about in this context of nostalgia.
I'm going to be a little bit devil's advocate on the side of AI here, because I think there's a sense that humans really can't imagine anything better now. When you look in popular culture, right now they are filming a remake of the Harry Potter series. When you look at some of the most popular films of the last 10 years, all that Marvel stuff, when you think about when that was actually created, Spider-Man was created back in the 60s. The act of creation for, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Thor, the Hulk, all those sort of things. We're seeing Disney remake stuff almost as quickly as it can put it out. Like, Moana is now coming out as a live action remake of an animated film that really wasn't out that long ago. And it's almost like we simply cannot move on from or are willing to create something new, maybe due to the financial risks of it. And
well,
so
yeah, that's
people are gravitating
risk mitigation, isn't it? Right there.
It's pure risk mitigation, but it's incredibly depressing from a creative point of view that we are so, in some ways, reluctant to fund and put money behind new acts of creation, especially in the cultural entertainment space.
And yet, look what happens when some bright spark decides to put together K-pop Demon Hunters, really out of nowhere, with zero expectations of it taking off to the extent that it did. And suddenly they've created this electrifying piece of IP that has ripped around the world with an insane degree of popularity.
I think what's interesting is we're seeing a real shift and a gravitational pull towards some of the more older analog ways that we enjoy entertainment as well. So I was reading a post from Tony Fadell on social media recently. So Tony Fadell is the father of the iPod, effectively the father of the iPhone as well. And he was linking to an article from the New York Times about how the iPod is enthralling young music fans. Tony Fadell's view on this was he's attributed it all to the fact that these devices have no notifications, there's no feeds, there's no algorithm deciding what you hear. And there's a whole load of these products that have this element of nostalgia about them. So when you look at vinyl sales, like vinyl is absolutely soaring, isn't it?
It's 19 straight years of growth. And this year in the States, revenue from the sale of vinyl records surpassed $1 billion for the first time since, I think it was 1983.
So like 40-year peak. That is quite a comeback. I did not have $1 billion industry pegged on vinyl in my bingo card this year. Even when we look at some of the other physical products, they're beginning to get traction as well. There's a really interesting product called Tin Can. So Tin Can, it's a phone, but it is a landline phone specifically aimed at kids. So it's got, the push button handset. It's got a spiral cord that you can twirl your finger around when you're chatting to people. And it's kind of being sold on like a child safety angle. So the parent approves all the contacts. So your child can only speak to family or friends. The parent can approve do not disturb hours. So I can really see this appealing to parents that have a nostalgic memory, of their own childhood when they maybe spent time on the landline talking to friends, and they want to recreate that for their kids. But I think there's also something else at work here. I think when you look at the popularity of these things, they're all screen-free environments. So vinyl, landlines. The iPod obviously had a screen, but not an internet-connected screen in the way we think of screens nowadays. So, there may be a nice nostalgic part of it, but they could just be a reaction to people not wanting to be extremely online anymore.
It's that thing of like a longing for relationships that are not mediated by screens. What's so fascinating about culture right now is when you think about the amount of time you spend communicating with people that you know and love, but honestly, most of the time they're represented to you through text on a screen, messages on WhatsApp. If it's somebody who lives far away from you, that's your relationship. So this idea of stepping back into a world of actual conversation in real time, not asynchronous communication, but live in the moment conversation where you're having to think a little bit on your feet and be a kind of sparky, receptive person in the moment and not just like painstakingly re-edit your replies on your tiny little screen.
Let's face it, the love heart emoji reaction to a message post is like minimum viable love that you can give to anyone that you have any kind of relationship with.
I also think there's a sense of tactility to these products, especially when it comes to vinyl, and a sense of the finite, which is really powerful these days. When you can go on Spotify and you're bombarded with I don't know how many millions, billions of songs, there's something quite nice in looking at your shelf and seeing, these are the things that I own. These are my choices. And that is one of the appeals of the offline world. And I think that specifically is what people feel so nostalgic for.
There's an intentionality about it, right?
When you think of how much of the doom scroll is stuff you did not choose to look at, basically nearly 100% of it, versus if you want to listen to a vinyl record, you really have to decide, this is what I'm listening to, and this is the side of the record that I want to put on. Do you want to have a quiz about people's attitudes to being online?
So much.
Oh,
so
boy,
much. Give me the
we?
quiz.
That's the reaction I was hoping for. Let's do a quiz.
This is a quiz!
Here's the quiz. What percentage of people think they spend too much time on social media? And I'm going to come to Chloe first.
I'm going to say 50%.
Okay, Kat, what percentage of people do you think spend too much time on social media?
Do I think spend too much time on social media?
What percentage, yeah, all of them. What percentage of people think that they spend too much time on social media?
I'm going to go with 43%.
You're both pretty close. Disappointingly, so this is a YouGov stat, it is 47% of people think that they personally spend too much time on social.
Why do you want us to fail your quiz, Alex?
I don't want you to fail my quiz. I just enjoy it more when you do. Okay, second question, similar but related. What percentage of people think they spend too much time on screens? Chloe, coming to you first. I'm going to do this in alphabetical order.
I'm going to say 67%.
Okay, specific, but weirdly specific. Fine. Katrina, what's your answer?
I'm going to go with 53%.
Okay, Kat's far-ish away. Chloe's disappointingly close. Disappointing to me. It's actually, this is according to a report from Deloitte, 70% of people think they spend too much time on screens. So that's a significant amount of people who I think both want to be on screens less, but also might need some help with being on screens less. So then there could be an opportunity for brands to provide that. So should we talk a little bit about what all this means for brands?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I'm going to roll out a quote that I've been holding on to for just such a moment. Unexpectedly from Davos, Mark Carney delivered a pretty impressive speech at Davos this year. But one of the things that I latched onto was this idea that nostalgia is not a strategy. And I think that's probably the thing that I would ask brands to hold on to in this sort of incredibly tempting, nostalgia-rich environment that we're in right now. It's really, really appealing to kind of dress up campaigns in the stylings and the clothing of the past and attempt to appeal to people that way. But I think it's really important to be a bit more considered and careful and insightful and nuanced about what you're doing, because what is underlying all of this gravitation towards nostalgia are some pretty deep and complicated feelings about the present and the lives that we're living right now. So I think it's really behooves brands to understand the feelings of their customers in relation to their lives and the products that are around them, and find something a bit more specific and interesting and resonant as the hook for their nostalgic campaign, if that's what they want to do.
But I will throw this in here. Mark Carney is obviously talking politically. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
Well, he's the Prime Minister of Canada. He's not, the CMO at Unilever.
He's no Mark Pritchard.
He's never had to try and persuade someone to buy laundry detergent in his life. Counterpoint, maybe nostalgia is a good strategy, because I believe there's actually some research that says it actually can be quite an effective strategy for brands.
Research from Janine Lasaletta found that reminding people of nostalgic times actually reduces the importance of money, making them less price sensitive.
Which is a good thing.
That is a good thing.
Put that in your pipe, Mark Carney.
Yeah, of course, because if you're a brand, what you want people to do is, spend more money, not think so much about price. And what you're trying to do is emphasize the brand value. And so evidence. There you go, Carney.
There you go. Yeah, take that to Davos. And there is actually there's some brands really not just putting some of this in their campaigns, but really making it the heart of their core identity. There's that fantastic sunscreen brand, Vacation, which is all built around this.
So Vacation is a 1980s inspired brand, but it was actually launched in 2021. So if you go on the Vacation website, you're just bombarded with images that look like they're from a 1980s women's magazine or someone's old photo album. It's just people having fun in the sun, but from the 80s. And that's the whole strategy of the brand. They're trying to bring back the fun of tanning in the 1980s. And it's standing out in a supermarket aisle and a pharmaceutical aisle when most of the other brands are all about, don't get old, look your best, we have the best SPF. They're zigging while everyone else is zagging.
Yeah, and they have a clear point of difference. So in defense of my Mark Carney quote, I'm coming back in here because what you said, Chloe, they're zigging when everyone else in their category is zagging. What you don't want to do with your nostalgic approach to advertising and communications is accidentally zag while everyone else is zagging as well. You need to find the thing that is going to distinguish you and find your unique nostalgic take on that, not just follow the herd into bell bottoms and 1960s center-parted hairstyles.
Let's talk a little bit around Vacation and what they do, because it's so well put together, isn't it? It's a very, very kind of holistic approach to the nostalgic trend. Even the scent of it is, I think they describe themselves as the best smelling sunscreen. And they worked with a parfumeur to actually create this very distinctive scent, which apparently mixes notes of coconut, banana, swimming pool water, swimsuit lycra, and pool toys. So the whole thing smells like you're at the beach in the 1980s. So it's a really kind of evocative scent, never mind all the other visuals and the imagery they put around it.
That's right. It's a very sensory-led brand. And that is, again, another reason why they're so different from every other sunscreen brand. And those sensory elements are completely linked to nostalgia. So those smells that you just described, they evoke a holiday memory. But even the products themselves are very sensory-led. So they have one product, which is shaped like a can of whipped cream. And it's meant to look like the classic American dessert Ready Whip. And it even feels like that when you put it onto your skin. In terms of touch, it's very, linked to sensory memories.
Of course, if you weren't alive in the 80s, you wouldn't know that a lot of people really did just put whipped cream on and try and use it as sun protection because that thing is thick.
I don't remember whipped cream, but I do remember an awful lot of baby oil.
Well, actually, that's one of their other products. They have a new version of sun tanning oil, which is designed to actually be protective for your skin. So it manages to have their cake and eat it because, they're actually offering SPF, but it makes you think back to those, glistening, oily times.
Those wonderful oily times in the 80s, sort of the threat of the Cold War.
But that's the point, isn't it? It's like we're not remembering the threat of the Cold War. We're not remembering all the bad times. The whole point of nostalgia is that it's just remembering the good.
It's the
That's not
rose-tinted
reality.
spectacles.
It's the rose-tinted spectacles. It doesn't mean that it's real, but that's the whole point here. They're not thinking about cancer rates or anything like that. They're just thinking about the fun times. And that's what the brands that need to that are tapping into nostalgia need to do, is figure out how to retract and extract those good memories.
Yeah, because I think for a whole generation of people that weren't alive in the 80s, all they know is that at Club Tropicana, the drinks were free. And that sounds pretty good when you don't have rent control anymore. But if this whole notion of pining for a past that you never experienced, the anemoia, there is actually a machine that will do this for you, isn't there? There is an anemoia device, I think developed by MIT, which will create scent around memories, but memories that you never actually experienced.
Yes. So it's actually researchers at MIT and Harvard. And like you said, Alex, it's called the anemoia device. How it works is that you get a photograph, you input it into this machine, and then the machine scans the photo. You can then use prompts, AI prompts, to determine which part of the photo you want it to look at, or you can put in a specific prompt around time. So you could request decay, for example, or another weird word, and then it will actually produce a scent. So there are about 50 scents that it works from, and then it makes a perfume based on the photograph that you've input. And the reason why this is so useful for brands, I'm not suggesting brands, create a decaying scent or anything like that, but the reason why
don't forget to zag.
Okay. The reason why it is so valuable for brands to think about the scientific possibilities of creating scent from memory is because how linked in the brain memory and scent are. There's research that actually shows that nostalgic memories elicited by taste or smell are even more positive than those triggered by other means. We were just talking about how it's so important that you're not just bringing up memories, you're bringing up memories of good times. So that link between memory and scent is really powerful. And if you remember from Marcel Proust's famous book, where he talks about the memory of eating a madeleine and then you get this rush of emotion, or maybe for the less cultured of you, that moment in Ratatouille when the food critic eats the ratatouille and is remembering being a boy. That actually is a scientific phenomenon called the Proust effect, named after Marcel Proust. And it explains how when you have sensory inputs like smell or taste, they trigger memory. And that smell is an especially potent sense because odor is processed through the limbic system in your brain. So you have specific areas in your brain, the amygdala and the hippocampus, and those areas control emotion and memory. And so the smell goes directly to them. And that's why it's so useful for brands to actually think about how they could play with senses like smell.
You want to know some sidebar trivia around Proust and smell? It's disgusting.
I thought you were going to say about Ratatouille, but okay, sure, Proust is fine too.
It's a disgusting Proust anecdote. Proust used to eat a huge amount of asparagus and then would urinate it into his chamber pot and leave it under his bed because he loved the smell so much. So that's the Proust effect as well.
That is so gross.
Well, that's ruined Proust for me.
I know. Thanks,
so
Alex.
next time you read Swan's Way or In Search of Lost Time, then that's the scent you need to be evoking.
I'm going to spend so much energy trying to get back to the madeleines.
Right, should we wrap this up and see if we can muster up some takeouts?
Let's do it.
Please, can we? Yes.
What's your takeout, Alex?
So my takeout, I'm going to, trying to move on from Proust, but keep thematically linked. I think when we look at a lot of this nostalgic stuff, and I think there genuinely is an opportunity there for brands. People are just absolutely gravitating towards it like moths to a flame. My takeout would be to remember like kind of the sensory physicality of a lot of the stuff. When you think about the tactility of vinyl, of iPods, of the landline phones, when you think about the aromatic edges of vacation, how they built that into their brand experience, it's the sensory elements that I think really give a lot of this nostalgic stuff the power when you want to implement it. So that is something I would keep front of mind.
I think that's really true, but I also think there's a comfort element there that is important for brands to take into account. So we talked about why brands would tap into nostalgia. So thinking about the comforting elements of smells, of senses, not thinking about weird asparagus scents, Alex, but thinking about, not just what does this look like, but what does it smell like, and how can that make people feel better about how terrible the world is right now.
Trina, top takeout from you?
Yeah, I think just building on what Chloe said, think about the feelings that underlie this kind of weird magnetism that nostalgia has for people at the moment. What is it that they're retreating from? What are the scary aspects of today that are causing people to turn towards a sort of beautiful time in their past and seeking comfort there? If you address the causes and the motivations that are underneath that, I think you're probably going to have a much more meaningful, resonant campaign. And also just, think about the intersection of nostalgia with your very own brand and the specifics of your brand and its history and its codes. There's no point at all, I don't think, in doing something that feels generic and surface level. The whole point of nostalgia is that you're getting into some pretty deep, important feelings if you're doing it right, I think. So it's being really mindful about finding exactly the right approach for you and also for your customers.
Good stuff. Right. So we're going to wrap this up now. If people want to know more about some of the things we've talked about today, we mentioned Tony Fadell. He has got a book out called Build, which is a fantastic read. If you want to check out the article on nostalgia, that is in the February edition of Architectural Digest. Thoroughly recommend watching the documentary Shifty by Adam Curtis. If you want to go down the academic route, the paper we talked about how reducing price sensitivity by taking a bit of a nostalgic angle on it. The academic paper is called Nostalgia Weakens the Desire for Money. It's a 2014 paper by Janine Lassaletta. Proust's epic book is À la recherche du temps perdu. Can't say I recommend it. And if you want to know more about Mark Carney, he is the Prime Minister of Canada. But that is what we have time for today. Hope you enjoyed the show. For myself, Chloe and Katrina, we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.
This is